season as we now move on to the big tours. Well, we're joining the action here now as the riders are making their way onto the Keutenberg, which means there are 72 kilometers still to race. We have a small breakaway in progress, and the man up here is the new world champion, Oscar Freire.
Well, he's had a fantastic start to the season, Phil, as we look here at Alberto Elli there, the Telecom rider. He also, one of the older riders on Team Telecom, but certainly this year having a very good season as well. He started early on, like many riders seem to have done this year in the Spodacom Report Tour in South Africa. And in this group as well there, you can see Jaroslav Ekimov. And the Rabobank rider on the back there is the man who was the revelation of last year's season, Mark Wouters, the Belgian rider on the Dutch squad.
Well, these little climbs, there are 27 of them throughout the race today, and this is in the south corner of Holland, which is a very hilly little region. Springtime taking a while to get underway this year in Central Europe, but this breakaway has now built a lead of some 3 minutes and 45 seconds. They've been a tenacious lot in the peloton today. They've been catching everything and holding the race together in one big bunch, but this group has managed to break the elastic, at least for the moment.
Interesting to note in that group as well, Phil, Dimitri Konishev in the white jersey there of Bortolo. He's a member of this new team, a new Italian team, which is being led by Giancarlo Ferretti, the former team manager of the Aesch squad. A great team manager who's pulled together a pretty impressive team this year. And in that team, the leader, obviously Fabio Valdato, had a great start to the season with a good performance in Milan-San Remo. But it seems to me as if Konishev is kind of having a rebirth to his career, because he had talked about actually retiring from the sport. He felt he was getting a little bit too old, but this season he's been very much to the front.
Well, a new team for him as well this year. Now, let's look at the peloton here. Martin Dembacker flashing through in his Dutch Championship colours. A lot of US postal boys right to the fore. Lance Armstrong among the starters today as well, after his brilliant ride 1 year ago. And Michael Bogart here too. Eric Zabel is the World Cup leader, having had so far a tremendous season, only failing to score in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. As we're looking now again at the race under pressure.
Well, this is the part of the course really in the Amstel Gold Race. You see, Phil, there are so many of these steep little climbs here in the Limburg area of Holland, right down in the bottom corner there. But once you go over the top of the climbs, it's the wind that actually causes the major effect. You get a group of 10 or 15 riders and then they accelerate, and these groups absolutely split to pieces. There you can see the Lotto rider very close to the front. That was Andre Schmiel. But certainly this is a race which really is a war of nerves towards the end, because we do have 27 of these very difficult climbs, 260 kilometers, and as we now come into Ingeberg with 69 kilometers left to go, these guys are a little bit worried about the position really behind of the group coming up. This is Andrea Perron we're looking at right now.
And there's the complete composition of the Kop group, which is the head group in the race. And it's nice to see a world champion on the attack in the year of his reign. He's having a wonderful season, 6 wins already. Now, having had a little bit of a layoff with the strained calf muscle, he's back in the thick of the action and straight up to the leading group. Sat at the back of this race for the moment is Andrea Perron.
Good to see Alberto Elli keeping the pressure on. He's obviously trying to do some kind of situation for Telecom to try and get them into a leading breakaway situation today. In the past, although this is a very difficult bike race, Phil, we have seen many bunch sprints towards the end, and in fact Jan Raas was almost unbeatable in this bike race over many years, and the year he actually did lose it, the rumour at the time was, I was actually racing then, he was told by the race organisation not to win the bike race because he was taking credibility away from it.
Well, it was true, and in fact Jan, they used to call this the Amstel Gold Raas because of Jan's name. But I actually was on site for many of those wins by Jan Raas, and he was a brilliant bike rider for this one event. Well, he was generally for events, past world champion, of course. He was actually the starter of the race this morning, back in the marketplace at the start, and now he is watching the race from a car.
Sergio Barbero is the man there for the Lamprey squad at the back in the pink and blue jersey. This is a pretty serious move though, Phil. These guys are all working very well together. Once they get over the climbs, they get themselves together and try to consolidate on that advantage. But certainly I would think towards the end we'll see a much bigger acceleration, a much bigger participation from the Rabobank team, because although they've got Mark Wouters in that team, their number one man really has to be Michael Bogart, the man who won that finish last year in a very close, tight sprint to the line with Lance Armstrong. And it actually had to go right down to the photo.
Well, there you can see the vigilant big group here. They have been chasing everything down today, splitting up a little bit on the climbs, but always coming back together. Quite an amazing scene, but you know, That's the sort of trend in the classic races this year. There's the latest gap, 3:25. The field have not been able to find a real leader of the pack, and there's a lot of guys riding at the moment who are very equal in ability.
Absolutely, riders like Peter van Petegem. This, although it's a fairly hilly classic, is a classic that can actually go across to the chances of a man like this. Barbaro here in a little bit of difficulty as we go down this descent. The next climb of the day, Phil, is going to be the Cowberg as they drop here into Valkenburg, and this is the corner that in fact was used in the World Championships on 2 occasions back in 1979 when I actually raced it, and you can't believe the number of people that were on the side of the road.
Well, this is a lovely area, southeast corner of Holland here. It is a holiday part. A lot of the Dutch people come down here for a week or two, and there's beautiful scenery here, very varied terrain, and plenty of nice cafes and things to do. The Cowberg is a 12% climb. It's a wide climb, and as Paul has said, in fact, it was here, Paul, where Jan Ross won his world title back in the 70s.
Absolutely an incredible sprint finish. And it was two years on the run that, in fact, the Dutch took it, because the year before, the world champion had been Gerrit Kneteman. Now, the riders here coming through Valkenburg know that they've got this very difficult climb of the Cowberg. Then they drop off at the top, down into the valley once again, then climb back up onto the same main road before heading back down into the town of Maastricht. And once they go into Maastricht, then they've still got a very big loop to do. And that other loop that they do, Phil, actually takes them into Belgium for a short while before coming back into Maastricht for the finish.
Konischev and Perron in reverse order on the front of the riders here. A chance to look at the colours of Faso Bortolo. But there's a massive crowd here to watch the race, and the Dutch supporters really love cycling. But this is the only major classic race on their cycling calendar, the Amstel Gold Race. They also have the Tour of Holland, that is their other major race. Other than that, most of the events are held on closed circuits within the small towns. The police don't like closing the roads down as they do for these two major events every year.
It is quite remarkable when you think of the number of Dutch cyclists that there aren't more major events in the actual country. They have to go abroad to race in France and Belgium and even down in Spain and Italy. And surprisingly enough, for a fairly flat country, they produce a number of very good climbers.
Well, they're heading up after the Cowberg. The next climb will be the Musenberg, which will be climb 26 today, and with 40 kilometers left to go. Looking through at Ekimov in his new US postal colors, back with the boys in America after a brief respite away with Vini Calderola. Just look down there at Valkenburg, Paul. What a massive crowd.
And it's a real holiday atmosphere whenever the Amstel Gold Race is on as well. Unfortunately, today the weather is magnificent. Although a little bit chilly at the start, it was 14 degrees Celsius, which is only just over 60 degrees Fahrenheit. But certainly it's a holiday for the Dutch today. They come out, they wait at a nice point on the course, they find themselves a good bar, they have a few beers, wait for the bike race to come by, and then immediately it's straight back inside to watch the finish on the TV.
And how nice when you're the national champion of your country and you're right on the nose of the peloton on the climb of the Cowberg, as Martin den Bakker is here. It's the second time he's worn that tricolor jersey as champion of Holland. And the big boys are on his shoulder. Also off to our right there, we've got Lance Armstrong trying to get his nose up front. What a brilliant ride he had in this event last year. And I think his form, little and sure, is coming good for his defence of the Tour de France.
Well, I reckon his preparation has been ideal. It's just about the same as it was this time last year. And Armstrong certainly not overweight like some of the other contenders for the Tour de France later on in the season, because amazingly enough, earlier in the year I saw Jan Ulrich Phil at the Vodacom Report Tour. He was looking in pretty good shape. He came back to Europe, put an awful lot of weight on. On the other hand, Armstrong has had a very difficult winter with a lot of places to visit, a lot of presentations to go to, but still he's managing to get himself slowly into the form which should bring him a good attack at that title, the Tour de France victory again this year after a magnificent performance last season.
Well, Marcus de Berg setting the tempo on the front here now, and he's come up that at a very quick rate, but there's others willing to work here. Looks like a Palmans rider, or is it...
Looks like it might be David Rebellin, actually.
Yes,
who's moved up to the front there. He's on the new Liquigas team there. That is an Italian team, and he's come up here to try and put in a fine performance in these hilly classics. We saw a lot of him in Liège-Bastogne-Liège just a week ago. But in fact, that little acceleration has split the field over here, and this is an attack coming from André Schmiel.
Yes, no cars behind the bunch, so they've got a split in the bunch at the moment. This is the way it's been going, but they've been coming back together again. Now, once over the top of the Cowberg, time is running out for the boys to get across the gap. The latest check we've got now is 2 minutes 45, and they are 47 kilometres from the finish. So they've now covered 210 kilometres in those legs today.
A lot of riders from Team Telecom in there. A quick glimpse there of Stefan Wesermann, a very good bike rider. Wesermann has had a fantastic season so far, and he's been riding very consistently to the front in all of the classics so far. But Martin ten Bakkerville is a man who wants to do an awful lot of work at the front for the team. He had a fantastic campaign last year in these series of races, the Flèche Wallonne, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and the Amstel Gold Race. And today he seems to me as if he's doing an awful lot of work, and most of that is obviously being done for the team leader, Michael Bogard.
Well, this is now the long straight road over the top of the Coburg, where it's recuperation time. The team cars are having a nightmare day today because of the narrow roads, the fact the big peloton is not splitting up at the back. The team cars cannot get through to the riders. They've started to feed the riders now from motorbikes because they can't get to the cars for their bottles. The Mappe car's got in amongst it there, but I think he will be getting an earful from the race referees from the position he was in.
This is the leading group. This little climb actually is a little deceptive because you've come over the top of the Kauberg and you think you're going to drop down into Maastricht, and what happens is you take a right-hand turn off the road, drop down into the valley just on the outskirts once again of Valkenburg, and then climb back up to the ridge, which takes you slowly down into the river towards the River Maas and Maastricht. The leading group are still riding pretty well together, although Mark Wouters, the rider from Rabobank there, wearing number 7, looks to be suffering just a little bit, and that information will certainly go back to the team management at the back, because today Rabobank really want to win this bike race, Phil. It's so important for them. As you said, it's the only major bike race here in Holland, and for them to get a win on home ground is primordial.
Yes, and last year, of course, it was Michael Bogart who got the victory. He's not had a very good start to the year, actually, but he's certainly in this race today. And back in the main field, as we've seen, 2 3/4 minutes back, as the race pressure stays on the front. Alberto Elli going through there, and Yekimov looking for a little bit of the back of the tail. This is an attack here from Sergei Ivanov, the Russian champion, now riding on the Farm Fritz team, and formerly TVM, of course. It's another new team now, sponsorship in its own right. And this man has some tremendous speed in those legs. He tries to rip away from the front, but you see, they'll let nobody go today, Paul. This is very unusual to see such a big bunch at this stage of the Amstel.
Absolutely, there's a huge bunch, and it is on the final circuit, once we've actually gone through the finish line in Maastricht and out onto that final loop, that the attacks are going to come, and I feel certain that then the main field will split. This is what it looks like at the back, though, and it is certainly not very easy at all. The US Postal rider right on the back of the group here is Tyler Hamilton, and that's not the place that he's normally used to at the moment. But let's not forget, Tyler Hamilton is thinking about prospects further down the road, especially the month of July, when he's going to be very much called upon to help Lance Armstrong at the Tour de France.
Complex year for the top riders this year with the Olympic Games. It always is, of course. But it's not just the Olympic Games this year. It's a long way to Australia to compete in them, which means you're taking a big slice out of your cycling season at the time when you really can't afford to do that. Tour of Spain is slightly overlapping the Olympic Games as well. And, of course, the World Championships follow, and the Classics in October and late August.
This is Yevgeny Spruk, so it's amazing to see this guy. He's had a fantastic Classics campaign so far, Phil. We've seen him aggressive in every round of the World Cup so far. So, strangely enough, even riding very well there in Liège-Bastogne-Liège just a week ago. He's a very adaptable rider. He had a great Paris-Roubaix, a good start to the season in Milan-San Remo as well, and he's always prepared to have an attack. Stefan Wesermann now has decided he's going to leap out of the front to try and toughen the race up for Telecom.
He's another man that's having a wonderful year too on Telecom. We think him as a new professional, which he isn't, of course, but he's only just really become a big figure in the whole scene of professional cycling. As a man in the peace race, the Berlin-Prague-Warsaw it used to be called, he has had tremendous results there. I think he's won it 3 times. But now he's mixing it on the top team alongside Ulrich and Zabel. This man is coming out in his own right.
Absolutely, he's a very strong rider. You can see the build of him though, Phil. He's a very squat rider on the machine. He has got a very good sprint when it comes down to the end of a lot of these bike races, and he's now got away over the top of this climb. He will now have to face again the long main road down into Maastricht, and when they do come into Maastricht, they've got that other very tricky and difficult loop. But the main field, as you said, Phil, once again, not letting anybody really get too far off the front of the pack, because I think they want to keep it together to have a real showdown on this final circuit. And it is a very difficult final circuit with the climb of the Mausenberg, and 2 times they have to go over the St. Petersburg, which is a small climb. It isn't really all that much, but just 1 kilometer, but it's very, very difficult, and that's where we normally see the platform and the big attack coming on the run into the finish line.
Well, the wind not annoying the riders as much as normal in Holland today, which to some degree is probably the reason for this bunch staying together so much. There's nothing to break it up with those crosswinds across the barren lands of parts of Holland. The race will pop into Belgium to complete its final circuit before coming back to the finish at Maastricht, where it started some hours ago now. Over 5 hours, in fact. There's Waterlamy on the right of our picture there with the yellow helmet on. And the bunch again, Paul, they've clawed the way back, and we've got a huge pack here.
Absolutely, it keeps splitting up and joining back together. There's Mauro Gianetti on the far side, having a quick chat with Rolf Sorensen. Sorensen not too happy, I think, that many of the riders not working at the front here, and all of the responsibilities being put on his team, the Rabobank team. Well, they are the team of the defending champion, the winner last year, Michael Bogart. And if they want to win this bike race again, they're going to have to do the work themselves and assume all the responsibility. And it's interesting to note that for the first time, we're not seeing a lot of work being done by the Farm Freaks team. In the early season races, like the Tour of Flanders and then Paris-Roubaix, we saw an awful lot of work being done by the grey jersey, the Farm Freaks. But today, I think they've decided to tactically cool it down just a little bit and maybe save something towards the end.
52 kilometres to the finish. About 31, 32 miles there, and this breakaway, which has been shaping up for a long time now and dangled off the front at just over 3 minutes, is still dangling off the front. There are one or two passengers, not least Mark Wouters on the back here. Looks a little bit overweight to me, Mark, but it's a long year and plenty of time to lose those pounds. But he had a wonderful season last year, winning first of all the Tour of Britain in fine style, and then going on to win the Tour of Luxembourg. Sadly, he crashed out in the Tour de France.
Look at that, Phil. It's 2 minutes and 5 seconds, so it's not really coming down very quickly at all, this gap, despite the fact that we can see a long line in the main field of riders really keeping the pressure on at the front of the pack. They're not really eating into that advantage. This group of 8 riders at the front, at one time they had a lead of over 4 minutes, but it certainly isn't coming down as quickly as I would have expected to on this run in here into Maastricht.
Well, even Maastricht has got complicated street furniture these days. The team cars are relieved. At least they can get up alongside their charges now and have a word. It looks as though these might be trying to get through to the head of the race and up to the 8 leaders.
They're not going to, because it's such a complicated route through here. This is a route that takes the riders on a small way to get into Maastricht, and then in a few moments' time they'll have to cross over the River Maas, and then they will go through the finishing line, and once they cross the finishing line, they will head out onto that small loop that actually takes them across the border and into Belgium for a very short while, and some very difficult climbs as well.
Well, these team cars have been waiting absolutely ages. One hasn't got through, but they are trying to get up to that leading group of 8 riders. And there's a warning with the red flag there about the split in the middle of the road. Certainly the Fassa Bartolo car's got through. He's gone up to the leaders. He's got 2 men up there in Perron and Konishev. But the tempo being done, this looks like the style of Andrea Tappi here at the head of the peloton. They are keeping a good tempo, and the gap is still not big. Words of advice now.
It's Sergio Passani, the team manager of the Mapei squad at the moment. And it is so rare, Phil, to see a world champion riding so aggressively as this man, Oscar Freire. Amazing to think that last year he had just 14 days of competition before he went to the World Championships and leapt out of that pack in the final kilometre to take only the second world title for Spain, which is quite remarkable when you think of Spain as one of the great cycling nations. They've only had 2 world road racing champions.
Eddie Mazzolini's the Polti rider. That's new colours for him, ex-Seiko. And looking at Dmitry Konishev there, looking for his car, as is Andrea Perron. There's Ekimov. It's coming down. 2 minutes now because Vesemani's gone back into the field. And it's a very tenuous lead. This bunch is enjoying the chase, I think, but they're not splitting up at all onto the Petersberg now.
Well, this is the Petersberg. It's right after the finishing line. It's a very difficult climb, and very often you can see the main field split up here into small little portions. These are the 8 leaders. They're still surviving, Phil, and they're now on the way to the little lap that takes them out into the countryside of Belgium, then coming back here to Maastricht for the finish line. The top of this climb is very often the launch pad for somebody to try and jump away on the final attempt at this climb, because they come up this climb with just 5 kilometers to go before the finish. But at the moment you can see these guys are keeping very much together, trying to work as a very good group, as a good unit, and they seem to have been doing that. But certainly number 7 on the back here, Mark Wouters, trying to get his hand into his back pocket and get some food out there. It's very much the policeman for the Rabobank team, and I think he's had the order not to work with this group any longer.
Well, tradition dictates that the Amstel Gold Race is a battle between all of the Dutch-sponsored teams, and they would actually destroy their own chances rather than see a rival win. because they don't like victory going to a rival team in this Dutch event. Back to the front here, Servaes Knaven of Farmfried setting the pace. And just on these narrow roads, the opportunity is rife now to go for it, but nobody is actually breaking this field up.
They certainly haven't decided to go forward yet. Stefan Weissermann was the telecom rider very close to the front and still riding in the top 10 or 15 places, Phil. I caught another glimpse of Lance Armstrong, and maybe he's thinking of a little bit of revenge last year because he feels that he was a little robbed in that victory in the sprint towards the finish line because Michael Bogert sat on him on the way down to the line and only just managed to get by him in the sprint. And I think a little bit more experience in sprinting, and Armstrong may well have been able to get the win there, but it was so close on the line.
And we also had that incident with the motorbike, the press photographer, that caused the accident when the four riders were together. And we'll never know if Marcus Seberg could have pulled off the biggie. This is Filippo Casagrande just holding on to the back there, brother of his more famous Francesco. And he's having a difficult time on the climb now. The thing is that on these narrow roads, you see, you're forced into a long line and you have to slow down. Then it really hurts to accelerate again.
And there is an acceleration. You can see the long line of the main field there. One or two riders getting popped off the back over the top of St. Petersburg here. And the work now is starting to come from the Farm Freaks team on the front. We've seen consistently Servaes Knaven in the grey jersey. Knaven is turning out to be a very good worker for the team. We are here in the streets of Maastricht. You see, we've gone through the finishing line, over the top of St. Petersburg, and this is the finish that the riders will come down a little bit later on when they will just have 1 kilometre to go. But unfortunately, they're now going to head out onto a large loop into the countryside.
Well, let's see if they can hold it together. They are far from safe here. In fact, I would say they're not going to make it unless somebody livens this group up a little bit. There's two riders from the Fassa Bortolo team, but they don't seem to be doing just more than what they have to. Mark Wouters is not doing anything whatsoever. There's the world champion Oscar Freire, wearing that jersey with pride. 6 wins this year already.
Look at this, Phil. Somebody's taking a shortcut around the corner there. And that's the problem, actually, with racing in Holland. There are so many of these directional islands, so many of these central bands down the road, which are very steep concrete bands, that in fact it does cause a whole lot of confusion, and everybody's now trying to keep in contact with the bike race.
Well, it's every which way as far as the riders are concerned, and when they're scrabbling, let's watch the picture down bottom right there. There's the lone rider. Actually, he didn't make the corner at all. He did a little bit of cyclo-cross there, and then good decision to go left, and he's got back in the race. I wonder who he was.
Well, you can be certain that his team mechanic will be checking that out, and he won't be too happy because the riders use very special tyres for bike races like this, and the mechanics look after them and they scrub them with a brush, they scrub them with sponges, and when a rider at the start rides through a parking lot or takes to the side of the road, the mechanics are not too happy about that.
Eddie Mazzolini, and this is a word in the ear of Dmitry Konishev. Speaks fluent Italian, of course, has an Italian wife, but he's Russian. And in fact, the team cars are now relieved because they've at last got up to their charges. They must have felt rather deserted, these boys, because the narrow roads have meant no help at all for them. Bottles have been sent up on motorbikes, but they're now able to give them a full layout of what's happening behind.
This car coming through now, in fact, is the car of the race director. And the race director of the Amstel Gold Race these days is, in fact, Leo van Vliet, a former top professional rider who raced on the top rally squad for many years. And I know Leo pretty well, and he's definitely pretty happy to still be involved with the sport.
Yeah, most interesting character. If I remember rightly, he beat you in your amateur days, Paul, didn't he?
Yeah, he certainly did. He actually beat me in a race called the Criterium des Vainqueurs at the end of the season in a small town called Colchester. And ever since that, we always had a pretty good laugh about that.
Well, he did anyway. Well, that's Leo driving the Mercedes on the right. Very nice car for the day. And this is Oscar Freire here wanting to get on with it, but they're not really at all coordinating now. All the presence of the vehicles here has sort of knocked any coordination out of them. They're more interested now in speaking with the management.
Yeah, that's always a big problem when the team management comes up to a breakaway like this. Once the guys have been working well together, there always is a little bit of disorganization coming in when 2 or 3 riders go back for bottles, or they want to take their coats off, or they want to take their arm warmers off. You lose a certain amount of impetus. Oscar Freire, though, is looking pretty good in here, but you can see, Phil, on the main field, this is Servaes Knaven on the front. The speed is completely different. They've picked it up an awful lot here in the main group, and certainly I think we're going to start to eat into that advantage, which last time check we got was 2 minutes. And when we get another one, I'm sure it'll be a lot closer to the 1 minute margin.
Well, there's still an awful lot of riders doing nothing here, although believe me, there are men being tailed off the back at regular intervals. Quite well-known names as well, so the form is differing. This is the last World Cup event of the current series until the season resumes after the big Tour de France. And Eric Zabel so far, and he's in here somewhere, I haven't seen him at all today, is a good leader of that competition. He's never really bothered with the competition before. He only rode a couple of the events last year, and the points he scored on those couple of events would have given him a 9th place overall. But there is a minimum qualifying number of races you must ride, so Zabel didn't appear in the overall result last year.
Well, it's amazing to see that, in fact, Eric Zabel is going to have a hard time living out this season, Phil, because it was reputed he'd done 20,000 kilometres of training before Milan-San Remo, and he will have put another 5,000 or 6,000 in since then. So certainly he's going to have to take a break, I would think, after this race, the Amstel Gold Race, if he wants to be competitive at the Tour de France, and then further forward down the season for the Olympic Games in Sydney.
There's an attack here, and this is split up. There's an attack. This has gone at the front of the race here, and I'm not sure that's Eddie Mazzolini in the Poultry jersey, being joined by Ellie, I think Konishev and Frere. So we missed the attack, we were in the bunch, but they've suddenly split this field, and gone now is Ekimov and Wouters, among others.
Well, this is the Mausenberg 6%. It's not a major climb, but it certainly was enough to split the field at the front, or the group at the front, which was 8 riders, and that was a very good attack there by Eddie Mazzolini, trying to come across now Sergio Barbaro. He's missed the split there, but he's digging very deep over the top of this climb, and you can see, Phil, the crowds are unbelievable here at the Amstel Gold Race, and certainly there will be attacks here in the main group as well. On the front, it's still Servais Carnarvon, but there's a big grouping there of Rabobank riders. They must be thinking about some kind of plan too.
Well, there's Servais up there, but I'll tell you what, also gone there was poor Andrea Perron, caught on one leg by the attack of Eddie Mazzolini. We'll see if they get back together once they're over the top of the Musenberg, which is the 26th of the 27 climbs. There are, in fact, 30 climbs in this race, but they don't count 3 of them for some reason, and just a total of 27 is a part of the competition. Well, the field here on the same climb is still keeping steady tempo. Let's get back up. These are the 3 dropped riders here, because that is Perron, and we've also got ahead of him Ekimov and Wouters. And they look as though they're finished, because there's huge tracks of daylight in front of them now.
Well, that's not going to be too good for Rabobank, and they certainly now must come to the front of this bike race. They were counting on this man. There's the gap there, 21 seconds between the leading 5 riders and the 3 who've been tailed off. But more importantly, I think, Phil, where is the main field? Because they are hammering along behind, and certainly they will be boring down. You can see them clearing the gap now between these 3 riders and the bunch. So certainly I reckon the main field cannot be too far behind the whole of this bike race. Yes,
they sent the neutral service car there past the 3 on the right to the leading 5. Here comes the Express, driven by the Farm Freaks boys, and trying to get this breakaway now brought back together, because they're running out of time here now. We're running out to inside 40 kilometers to go. They need to close it down, but if they do close it down, we are going to be treated, I think, to a bunch sprint of a massive bunch of riders here, and that hasn't happened really since the days of well, Jan Ross, I would think.
Absolutely. I can't imagine that that's going to happen, Phil, because there are some very difficult climbs still to come. Those 3 have actually been brought into the fold by the main field, I reckon now, or they're about to be at the moment, and the gap just 39 seconds. Andrea Perron is the man at the back there. Vyacheslav Ekimov doing his job today for the US Postal Service team. But Ekimov has had a very good start to the season, Phil. We saw him win the 3 days of La Panne, which is regarded by everybody as a pointer to the Classics condition. And then he rode a great Tour of Flanders and a very good Paris-Roubaix as well, helping George Hincapie again to a top performance there.
And Mappe must be absolutely delighted with the way Oscar Freire has suddenly become a big man. When you win the world title and you've done nothing in your life, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into the deep end, but they are bringing him through nicely. But he is living in the best company. Those 6 wins were not easy wins for him. As you can see now, he's enjoyed this breakaway in the Amstel Gold. I'm not so sure it's going to stay away, but clearly he's got a lot of strength there.
He certainly has. He's a fantastic bike rider, and I think he's very lucky to have changed across to Mappe, because they will build him and actually develop and work with him over the next few years. As we look now at the distance between the leading group of 5, Phil, and the group of 3 behind, it's just inside the 1 minute mark, and the main field, in fact, at the moment, as we look, is right on their tails.
There's There's one long, thin line of bike riders down there now, and it's the Rabobank team who are pulling it along. The gap is about 1 minute 20 now, so they've halved it, and they're closing in slowly but surely. But it's still a fair way to go.
There's still another couple of good climbs as well. We're around about 35 kilometers to go to the finish. We've still got 3 more climbs to go, Phil, and the most difficult one obviously is the Eben, which is the next one up, followed by the Hellenby, and then the final climb of the day, St. Petersburg. This is Rolf Sorensen on the front, and you can see now a change in the tactics at the front of this bike race, because a lot of the Rabobank riders now realize that they don't have a man in the break, and the responsibility certainly is theirs if they want to win this bike race again. Still, it is a fairly large group left at this stage of the game, and a lot of orange jerseys now coming to the front.
Well, the whole point of putting in the Hellenby climb at the end was to break up any possibility of a bunch finish. Well, I'm not so sure. These boys have been coming back every time they've gone over the top of a climb. All the Rabobank team are here now to try and shut down this attack, and so too the farm freaks. So it's a one-on-one as far as the Dutch are concerned, and that's the shortest gap we've had for a long time. They've got them down now to 57 seconds.
There's Tyler Hamilton just creeping into the shot there, so feeling a little bit better in the latter part of this bike race. I haven't seen Lance Armstrong for a short while, Phil, but I do believe that he is still in the race at the moment, and if he is showing the form that he was showing this time last year, he must be pretty close to the front of this group of what is around about 65 bike riders now.
I would say, yeah. But only one team, possibly 2, doing all of the pacemaking here. The rest are waiting for an opportunity to see if this leading group, which is now down to 5 from 8 riders. This is the day that Holland closes its roads to a big-time race, the Amstel Gold Race. Started in the mid-60s, this event, and I must say I've seen most of them over the years, and there's been some excellent racing because of the nature of the course. This is a very strange pattern today, though.
It is, but it's also a very nervous race as well. 34 kilometers to go. But a lot of these bike riders, Phil, the first part of the course out in the roads of Limburg is very dangerous because of all of these directional islands. We're now going to a part of Holland where there are not quite so many. The roads are a lot more open, and this man is a man capable of winning here today, Phil. This is Johan Museeuw, the winner of Paris-Roubaix this year, and certainly everybody now believing that he's come back to the form that he had before his accident 12 months ago, and he really is, for me, the bike rider, the classic rider of the 90s, and now he's racing in the 21st century.
Absolutely, and the way he won Paris-Roubaix this particular year was superb. I was looking there at his leg. There was no evidence of the scar of his operation there. It may have been on the other side, of course, but it is the left leg that was so badly damaged.
An incredible comeback, really, one of the great comebacks in the sport of cycling, because not only did he nearly lose his leg, Phil, but he almost lost his life. And if it hadn't been for his wife, who in fact trained as a nurse, he probably wouldn't have called the doctors that night, and he may well have passed away, because he's a tough man. He thought, well, you know, it's normal that it hurts after an accident like that. I don't really need to go to hospital. I'll go a little bit later. But his wife said no chance. She got onto the emergency services, and he was taken immediately to the emergency room of the hospital near Ostend, and they sorted him out pretty quickly. But if it hadn't been that quick reaction by his wife, we might not be looking at Johan Museeuw today.
Hardly bears thinking about. Here comes Eddie Mazzolini's car. New car for him today. Polti, ex-Seiko. Alberto Elli, grimacing at the back and not looking as though he's going too well now. The poor old team car can't get through. Try the near side.
Well, let's not forget Alberto Elli is probably one of the oldest bike riders in this breakaway, Phil. He's pretty close to 34 years of age. He's been around for an awful long time, but he certainly is riding very well, and he's a man that can be counted on, especially for the Telecom team when they go through to the Tour de France later in the year. You see now there's an awful lot of pressure. There is Eric Decker and Michael Bogard, and pretty close to them Lance Armstrong as well. But now you can see the leading group of 5 there as we look back down the road. You can see the main field certainly eaten into that advantage, and pretty shortly I think we're going to see what we call in Italian gruppo compacto, everybody together.
And absolutely amazing that is going to be as well. Valmier, 30 kilometers to go, less than 20 miles to the finish, and this breakaway is still there and hoping. Oscar Freire checking them all out. There's Ellie sitting at the back. Paul said he's a bit long in the tooth these days. He turned pro, in fact, back in 1987. So he's one of the gentlemen of the professional peloton. He's had a few wins, He's won something like 25 races.
He's actually held the King of the Mountains jersey at the Tour de France as well. But he has, over the last few years, turned into being a very solid bike rider over all the terrains. You know, he's a tough man, and the kind of man that you need when the racing is very hard over the big mountain stages. But the man on his inside now, wearing the world bands, Oscar Freire, he's a young bike rider. He really is a major surprise to the world of cycling, and a fresh surprise as well, because certainly having won that title at the end of last year, he's come out and proven that the curse of the rainbow jersey is certainly not on him.
Great to see. Oh, well, that's not good news for him either, though. 35 seconds, and the Rabobanks are bringing this train along now, having taken over from the Farm Fleet. I don't think they can possibly survive now with the climb still to come and 35 seconds only in hand. I was about to start discussing who might win the sprint in that breakaway, Konychev or Freire, but it looks like it won't matter now. It'll be academic, because these boys are going to have them very soon.
Absolutely, they've decided what they want to do. They realise they're coming into the tactical part of this course now, and they know that Michael Bogart is a very strong bike rider, and they reckon that they want to keep this bike race together, because they think that he's the man who will be attacking once we get to the next couple of hills. Alberto Elli, I think you're right, Phil, is starting to suffer a little bit on the back of this group, and the man who's the freshest, the man who's the most urgent in pushing the moves at the front is Oscar Freire, but with 35 seconds advantage, it must certainly all come together pretty soon.
Yeah, Barbaro, who was the last to get across on the split on the Musenberg, is actually riding very well now. He's recovered and he's taking the line through, followed by Mazzolini, but Ellie has stopped working completely. His argument will be, well, my World Cup leader, Eric Zabel, is in a group which is coming up at 35 seconds. Every excuse not to help them break away.
But the presence of him here at the moment actually takes pressure off the Telecom squad. In fact, he's decided he's going to move forward and try and keep the group going just a little bit longer, because as long as he is here, it in fact takes pressure off Telecom, and they can sit in that group. And for Eric Zabel, he's having an armchair ride at the moment, because his team has not had to do any work at the front of this bike race.
Well, everybody here seems to be giving all they can give right now. It's been a long breakaway for them. Ellie himself driving now, as Leo Van Vliet rather, goes through on the right of us.
Looking back down the road there, Phil, you can see the motorbikes. The motorbikes at the front of the main field, so it's very much inside the 30-second mark now. And still Oscar Freire, he doesn't want to give up at all. He wants to keep the pressure on. He wants to try and go clear. And interestingly enough, his tactic today was to go out on the attack, because Oscar Freire is proving to be a very rapid sprinter. And I would have thought he would have adopted the attitude of a man maybe like Eric Zabel, to sit back and wait and hope there's a group of 25 or 30 riders in with a chance of a sprint to the finish.
Well, that's normally the way it should be, but as we pull back here, I think we're going to see a huge pack of riders, and there they are. At this stage of the Amstel Gold, it's not unprecedented, but it is highly unusual.
Absolutely, the work being done by the Rabobanks. Well, there you can see the champion of Holland in third place, Martin ten Bakker. Himself today being put into a situation where he's having to do an awful lot of work for the team. They didn't have too much pressure on them early on, because they did have a man in that early breakaway, Mark Wouters. Now he's been caught by the main group, and we're being put into a situation where the Rabobank squad are having to come to the front, support the whole weight of the race, because nobody else at the moment is too keen on pulling back those leading group of 5. Sorensen swinging off the front here, and certainly in that group, they're putting a lot of pressure now onto the shoulders of Michael Bogart, and it's so very difficult in a race like this to win 2 years on the run. I know Jan Raas was able to do it 4 years on the run, but certainly bike riding has changed an awful lot since the days of Jan Raas. And attack now, this is Konychev trying to leap off the front.
Well, can they? I think they've got. Well, they're not going to go anywhere, are they now? That was the last gasp by Konychev to try and cause a reaction. But they're just about spent. Nobody's too strong to break away from that group of 5. And this bunch know now that they are bringing the Amstel Gold Race all back together again. And I don't know how many's down there, but it's at least 60 or 70 riders this morning, or this afternoon rather, from the 190 that started out.
Konychev is carrying on. He's still trying to go over the top of this slight drag in first position, but he's really just prolonging the agony, because the main field is here. They've picked up the 4, and in fact there's only just one man resting a little bit further up the road, and that's Dmitry Konychev, and pretty shortly they're going to be on his tail, and there it is.
27 kilometers from the finish, and the catch has been made. Now the riders waiting for who will make the next move. We've still got the steep climbs to come, And maybe the organisation who slipped this climb in a few years back to try and stop bunch sprinting may have be very wise here now, because they may get a group away on that final climb. It's only a short, stabby climb, but it could hurt the legs.
The next climb will be the climb of Eben. And moving to the front there, Phil, a lot of US postal riders getting into the action as well. Maybe they're trying to set something up for Lance Armstrong. Armstrong so far has had a pretty easy bike ride here in the Amstel Gold Race, and he is the kind of man who's got the explosive acceleration on these short climbs in the Limburg part of Holland here to get away and force a group of 5 or 6 riders clear.
Now, big chance now. A lot of riders in here are going to feel their chances have suddenly been enhanced. They'll know how they're feeling, of course. Sprinters can start drooling a little bit, I think. We haven't seen the World Cup leader Zabel, but we understand he is in that bunch. There's been no reports to the contrary, and he's been hiding nicely. But he's going to start thinking again now of more World Cup points at this point.
Absolutely. Now a little discussion here at the front. This is Leon van Bon from the Rabobank team having a quick word on the far side with Mark Wouters, who was in that breakaway a little earlier.
Yeah. I wonder what he's saying to Mark. Mark's giving him first-hand impressions of what it's like to be out front for half the race. And he slipped to the back now. Van Bon hasn't had any performances this year yet. He's a rider that tends to come to form around about June, so he may be a little bit early for him. As they come off these beautiful streets in Holland, these residential streets. But they do have a lot of problems in Holland now with traffic furniture and humps and sleeping policemen, as they call them.
Well, everybody's getting a little nervous now, Phil, because next on the agenda is going to be the climb of Eben. And over the top of that, there's only around about 25 kilometers to go to the finish line.
Saint-Simeon, 4.5%. 27th climb of the day.
2 or 3 riders, 4 riders managing to force off the pace, but you can see the big line there of the main field. They really are putting pressure on themselves at the moment of trying to get at least a small group of riders clear off the front of this pack.
Well, the big team surely can start manoeuvring now. US Postal trying to get in here. Here comes an attack by André Schmil. Schmil always can smell opportunities. This man knows when to make moves and test the water. And he's giving it a go now.
Certainly moving forward there as well. The Mapei rider looks like Paolo Bettini, the winner last weekend of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And this is a huge group, Phil. Look at that. It's very rare to see so many bike riders in with a chance at the end of the Amstel Gold Race. Here is the champion of Holland, Germany, I should say there, Udo Boltz. He's not riding as well as he was over the last couple of weeks. He shouldn't be riding so close to the back. And Rolf Sorensen still fighting to try and find some form after an early season accident, and it's harder and harder as you get older in the career to get over a difficult problem like that. And Sorensen, although he had done a lot of work earlier on, finding himself pretty much now near the rear of the pack.
Well, he won't have much longer to go. He's been around for such a long time, Rolf, and he's won some great races in his career. We'll miss him out the peloton, though, because he's been a regular for 15 years or so. Another attack. This looks like Bettini, is it?
It is Bettini trying to get himself off the front. It's not a very steep climb here at the moment, but it's really come out to the front, and he is hammering. He must feel like a changed man, Phil, after winning Liège-Bastogne-Liège. We're now coming into Houtin, Saint-Simeon. It's only a small climb. It's hardly a climb to be called anything at all, 4.5%. But that acceleration has really put the cat amongst the pigeons, and there's a rider from the Lamprey taking over the chase at the front.
Well, it's the only way is to break this field. It could be Ballerini, big Ballerini on the front now. The crowd here must be extremely surprised to see the whole field coming through Saint-Simeon.
They actually have got a slight advantage here, Phil. They pulled themselves off the front of the main pack, but they've decided that's no good. And on the back of that group was Weinsteins. But here in the group is the World Cup leader, Erik Zabel, wearing number 48. He's still in with a chance. Now, they're going to have to get rid of this guy before the finish if they want to make sure that they can win the Amstel Gold Race, because Zabel is having a fantastic season. So
he was there all of the time. We hadn't seen him. We thought he was. Now he knows he has a real chance here of major World Cup points. He is a specialist in the big finishes, and at the moment, that's the way the Amstel Gold is setting up to be. I think the last group sprint we got was taken out by the former East German Olaf Ludwig, which was about 8 or 9 years ago. And normally, it's small groups of very rarely more than 30 or 40 men.
Well, I'm not sure there's going to be a bunch sprint today, Phil, because the time seems to arrive when a lot of these riders want to attack. There's an Once rider going off the front there. and it may well be Laurent Jalabert. Jalabert is in this group, but it's a much smaller rider, so it could well be that it's David Echavarria. We've seen him riding so well over the last 2 weeks or so. But Once now coming to the front of the bike race. We're seeing so many different teams coming to the front now, Phil, trying to put the pressure on this event.
And also reminds me, Paul, we haven't seen anything of Laurent Jalabert either. He's in there somewhere too.
Absolutely, but Team Telecom are very attentive. A lot of pink and white jerseys very close to the front. And Stefan Weissermann is the man there in third position. Weissermann really is a hard worker. He's not scared of going to the front of a bike race and doing as much work as possible.
Well, Once, the team that's always supported the World Cup events, although for the Spanish, they never seem to do well in the World Cup races. The same applies to Kelme. But Benesto are rarely seen here. And now another terrific attack here. Now, this is the only way they're going to break it up. Keep on launching it with lots of power, but they've got to have people willing to come forward and carry it on.
That was Sprook, and immediately onto his tail was Andrea Taffy, and Stefan Weissermann once again looking for the move today. Stefan there on the left-hand side, but Taffy, boom, immediately across and onto his tail.
All back together. Weissermann sits up and plays around in his back pocket there.
Jeroen Blijlevens, Polti rider, and one of the big transfers of this winter season coming across. Surprising to see Jeroen Blijlevens still in with a chance as well, Phil, because Blijlevens normally has a very difficult time here at the Amstel Gold Race, and he will be moving forward now to try and hope that if there is a split on the next couple of climbs, he's going to be in the front half of the main field. He too is a man really looking for good early season form, because he hasn't had the start to the year that he normally has.
And that was Sergio Barbaro, who was in the breakaway there, who was just touching Blijlevens. And at 22 kilometers to go, it looks as though the Telecom boys, Ralph Aldag on the front here, are now driving for Eric Zabel. Zabel must have said something to them, because they've taken control now. And look at this ripper off the left.
Well, that's Taffy. You can't mistake that style, straight out of the main field. He's a great bike rider, Phil. I love to see him racing. He uses the motorbikes all of the time. He tries to catch out the cameraman just to get a little bit of a slipstream off that machine. And he's not doing anything wrong at all. It's the motorbike from the TV who has to get out of the way.
Oh, well, that was an absolute scorching attack, because I thought the bunch were going pretty quickly till Taffy came by. But I would think that right about now, his legs are screaming.
He's a star. I really love to watch him race. He's unbelievable. The style of him when he comes out of the pack. Let's just have a look at that one more time. You know, they're going full ball. There's Aldag on the front of the main field looking for his teammates, and bang, Taffy hits them.
Well, that's a fabulous attack, and that's the way to do it, but I'm not so sure after an effort like that he can keep it going. This has been a very quick race today. It's in excess of 41 kilometers an hour as we go under 20 kilometers from the finish now, but it's not an easy 20 kilometers.
Certainly isn't. We've still got two very difficult climbs. 91 there. We could get a quick glimpse of Peter van Petegem. He's a good bike rider, Van Petegem, and he certainly would be looking for a chance here to come out with a victory, because it looks at the moment, Phil, as if we are going to be treated to a very large group, because we still have got at least 50 bike riders in with a chance here of taking out the Amstel Gold Race.
Well, it's a long straight road, hardly conducive at this point to a breakaway, but there's 4 or 5 riders trying to get it all together here. This is Taffy, and this is the next man coming along. It looks as though it might be Weissermann. And in fact,
Alexander Vinokurov,
yeah,
very similar style, a short, punchy style of this young man. Another of the great winter transfers. We've had a lot of very important transfers during this winter season. Vinokurov has been brought across from the former Casino team, and he's certainly looking forward to the Tour de France. A winner of the Dauphiné Libéré, a very great climber. And these are the events where we start to see the climbers for the first time. Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Flèche-Wallonne, the Amstel Gold Race, and certainly that winter season. But you know, they still haven't snapped the elastic. Paolo Bettini is trying to get onto the wheel of Van Petegem, and as we speak, in fact, David Rebellin coming across there as well. And a little bit further back, it's another rider from the Rabobank team, and this looks very much like the big face of Eric Decker.
so we've now got all these riders. This is Bogert, this is last year's winner who's come across. And so we've now got 4 or 5 riders here making the best of the tailwind. And there's a group. There's Weinstein has just come across as well, and that is Marcus Seberg, the rider who might feel robbed last year when that accident with the motorcyclist caused him not to be in at the kill with his famous sprint.
A bit further down, this is Vyacheslav Ekimov at the back of another group. Ekimov has been in the front of the bike race for an awful long time, and this may well be the decision, Phil. This may well be the time that the group has gone Two of the riders in this group were in the front of the Amstel Gold Race last year. The man sitting on the back there, Marcus Berg, the man there wearing number 1, last year's winner, Michael Bogard. But Peter van Petegem is the man who really blew this race apart on that climb there of Halambe. And that was a great move by him. And what he needs now is for the rest of this group to start working. There is Paolo Bettini, the winner of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. The big rider coming through here from Palmers is Van Dijk. Yes,
that's right. So he makes up the 7. We missed that one, but all 7 are here now. If they got down to the finish, of course, Zeberg is a big candidate for a win, and there he is. So injustice last year when a carelessly parked motorcycle took out 2 of the 4 leaders. He was one of them, and you know he might well have won that race in the sprint. As it was, Bogert just hung on to beat Lance Armstrong. And I said at the time, if it had been anywhere except Holland, Armstrong would have won. I think the extra home power there brought him over the line first.
Absolutely. The last lunge for the line was the most important one. Now, this is a pretty serious-looking group here, Phil, because now there's 2 Rabobank riders in the leading group, and they'll be pretty confident about that because they are both very good winners. They will, though, have to try and get rid of Peter van Petegem because he, for my betting, is the fastest man in this leading group, the Kopp group, with the 2 riders there from Rabobank, Bettini, Van Petegem, Weinsteins as well, a man who has had a very good early season campaign, and he's wearing that sort of mauve and white jersey as the champion of Latvia.
Weinsteins is a man of the future, very much so. We're going to be talking about him for many years to come. There he is on the far side of the camera. And still the memory card team now. It's a new team on the front working hard here. Well, they've had Tristan Hoffman in trouble at the back of the field today, which is unusual for Tristan. He's such a man for the classics, but he's having an off day perhaps. It looks like Taffy on the front.
He won't be too happy at that either, Phil, because having such a great season in the classics, he really was looking forward to performing well here at the Amstel Gold Race. And that's just the way it goes in bike riding. Sometimes you can have a bad day, and especially in your own country, well, that doesn't go down too well. The Francis de Jeux rider there, in fact, in second position is Frédéric Guédon, a winner last year a winner a couple of years ago, I should say, of Paris-Roubaix, and the man just in front of him was Stefan Hurlo. 15 seconds between the leading group and this group here, and still an awful lot of US postal riders in there.
Good to see as well. Ralph Aldag giving us a nice strong look at the camera as he went through there. There's Vyacheslav Yekimov still here. He's done well to hang on, really, hasn't he? Because that was a tough breakaway they were all in earlier.
And at the back there, the Mapei rider, one of my favourite bike riders, Wilfred Peters, a definite #1 man to have. If you have to pick your dream team in professional cycling, you would always want a man like Wilfred Peters there because he is such a stalwart, such a tough worker, always ready to come to the front and work when needed, and always has great morale as well.
Well, this is the leading group here. What Winder was strong and right behind them on the climb. You see by the Belgian flags there, because that's where we are right now. These are roads in Belgium. Was right behind the leading group when Peter van Petegem attacked. He's pulled away some excellent quality bike riders, but I'm not so sure whether they can stay away, because the vigilance of that group today has been something special. The last year's winner, #1, Michael Bogart. It's always nice to come back and do it again, of course, at least appear in the attacks if you can't do it. Climber Saint-Pierre, 8%, and Telecom now. I think that's Vesseman on the front.
Yeah, but what's more important, Phil, there, in 5th place there, you caught a quick glimpse of the white jersey of the leader of the World Cup. Telecom have now decided they want to shut this bike race down. They've got a fairly good group. They know now that there's only this climb and then the final climb of St. Petersburg to try and keep this race together. So they're going to try and pull back the leading group and try and keep Eric Zabel at the front of this bike race for the final 2 climbs of the day. And then he's certainly got a great crack at taking the victory. But the most important thing to do is to try and pull these riders back at the moment. And looking at the man who wears #1, Michael Bogart, he doesn't look that fantastic.
No, he doesn't, and this group does, and they're coming back together again. Mercatoni Uno having a little dig here now.
Looks like Marco Velo trying to get off the front there, trying to break up the big charge on the front of Team Telecom. Team Telecom will not let him go too far off the front, but they'll keep themselves organised. And in fact, that acceleration there from Mercatoni Uno has brought the 7 leaders almost back into the main field. And in that main field, Eric Zabel, Johan Museo, and still Laurent Jalabert.
It's impossible to pick a winner right now. This group is going absolutely nowhere as we turn back towards Holland. Those 7 leaders, we think it's Marco Velo bridging the gap down there for Mercatoni Uno. but it won't matter. It'll all be academic in a minute. Our cameras are out of it now because of the proximity of the bunch, but we can see everything here as the catch is made from the helicopter. There's a crash, you're right.
That's going to be of major importance to the bike race.
What on earth caused that?
I think they were all scrambling to the left-hand side of the road, trying to stay on the wheel of the man in front of them, and boom, they all went down. And that will split that main field, but the telecom guys were all in the front.
Well, there's the split that we see, and I wonder if our cameras realised it, because I don't think they have actually. The helicopter's continuing the race. Well, we saw what appeared to be a pile-up. They split the field, don't know who's in it at the moment, but we've now got three bunches here trying to make echelons in the crosswind.
Well, that was unbelievable. They went down like a bag of potatoes, and it was certainly somebody touching the wheel of a rider in front. And still, this will give the advantage a little bit to the riders off the front here, because a certain amount of chaos will come. Let's take a look at that once again.
Well, what's to the right of our picture here? And goodness knows how it came to happen on the road. There it is, a touch of wheels. The two riders have gone, possibly three. They must have touched wheels, Paul.
Unbelievable the way they went down. They just went down, bang, and then they were on the ground. It's one of the riders from Fassa Bortolo who's gone down there, I would think, because this is the rest of the main field trying to move forward to the front of the bike race. It could well have been somebody like Andrea Perron who was involved in that. But the guys we're looking at now are the guys who've been blown away from this Amstel Gold Race at the moment, and they are not really in with a chance of a kill.
Right, as we look here at the race leaders now, still struggling to come together as they descend off the climbs. They're all together again. We are hearing that, in fact, Laurent Jalabert has been involved in that crash and is out of the race and possibly on his way to hospital. So let's hope he's okay.
Well, that's really unfortunate for Jalabert, because he was having a pretty good race. He rode very well last week in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He did a very good Flèche Wallonne, so his season was starting to hot up. And I hope for Laurent Jalabert that it's not too much of a problem there. This is the big river, the Mars, the Meuse, they call it in France. And this is the race where we cross over and then head down towards Maastricht for the very last time. And very shortly, Phil, we will be looking at that final climb of the day, the St. Petersburg.
We're back towards Holland again, and that was Bettini leading the charge. These riders are sticking together like glue today. I must borrow some of that when I go out with the boys training, because this has been a very, very good race in many ways, but disappointing in others, because the riders are just allowing nothing to get away. They're scrambling it back together again, but there's a split now, and ironically caused by the crash. And it looks to be 16, 17 riders up there.
Absolutely, you can see them, and now this is the rest of the main field are just trying to get down that descent. It's a very tricky descent, but for these guys, it's basically all over. They're more than a minute behind those two groups, which are much further up the road at the moment. And that 17-man group is going to be very important, but there's a man trying to get across at the moment as well. We saw just a few moments ago from the helicopter, and I think it will be interesting to see whether or not Eric Zabel has made it across on the descent.
Let's see if we can identify some of these riders now, because this could well be at last the split that makes the Amstel Gold Race this year. And that's Stefan Westermann for sure there, having a little dig, and he looks over his shoulder, but there's the split, Paul. I do believe it's coming back.
Well, it really is going to go down to the last few kilometres here. The blossoms there, you can see springtime really making this a remarkable day today for the Amstel Gold Race. What a great move by Stefan Westermann, and they haven't actually taken up the chase behind him, Phil. And he is a tough bike rider, you know. If they don't chase him down soon, he could well find himself riding to victory.
Passing one of the big locking systems here on the Meuse, or down the road that takes us, splits Holland and Belgium and Germany and France. And we're coming back over the bridge again, and it is Stefan Westermann who's made his move and gritting his teeth. Difficult ride, a long straight road alongside the river here. He's just going to have to go. He has that wonderful style. He always keeps his head up and crouched forward on his end of his saddle, and it's not the sort of streamlined ducking and diving style we often see.
You can see now, Phil, that in fact there is no organised chase behind. Still groups of 4 and 5 riders trying to get across. And that will give the advantage to that leading group of 17 men at the front of the bike race at the moment. But certainly we still do have a very difficult climb to come over.
Well, this looks to me as though it might well be Johan Museeuw, or is it Wilfred Peters? It's Wilfred Peters who's got himself in the split there with the Polti rider.
Peters, always a man to be counted on, trying to pull the bike race back together. He's obviously been given a little bit of freedom today there. The man on the far side is Bart Voskamp, the Dutch rider on the Polti squad. He too is trying to pull himself up to that leading group of 17.
But it's still so much anybody's race here, and the riders know it. And as they come here now there's a shutdown here, The Vini Calderola boys not too happy, and nor are the Lamprey riders, and so they've had to slow down, and if they allow that to happen, then of course the break is gone.
It'll be interesting to see, although, Phil, we did have a lot of those riders from Team Telecom on the front. I'm not sure whether or not Eric Zabel is in this group. Roman Weinstein certainly is, 132 there. Champion of Latvia, a very good man when it comes down to the finish. And on the front, it's Team Telecom setting the pace, so that looks like Stefan Weserman. It looks as if his breakaway came to naught, and he's now decided to change tactics now and ride for the team.
Now, where is Zabel then? Zabel, as far as I know, is not in this 17. He's back in the main field.
And the gap there, you can see, is actually stretching out. There's no chase there at the moment. You can see one or two riders trying to get across. If anybody has got the power, that gap is not too big to be able to leap across on this final climb of the day, the St. Petersburg. And they will be getting there very shortly. There, in fact, look at that, Phil. That is Oscar Freire and Eric Zabel in this leading group. Now, that is pretty impressive. Oscar Freire was in that breakaway for an awful long time. He went clear over the Kuttenberg, and he's still in the bike race. But Eric Zabel, he must be really twitching now.
Well, if he gets a big load of points today, then I think he can put his feet up for the rest of the World Cup season. To be quite honest, he has a good lead already. And remember that his big danger man at the moment, Johan Museu, Andre Schmil, aren't in this move, and that is why Weserman now is not going to look over his shoulder. He's going to go as long and hard as he can. But what a lovely ride by Oscar Freire, the world champion, in that earlier break, which is a very difficult break, and he's still looking for the moves right now.
Well, here's Johan Museu there, number 13. And this is the point where we're just about to turn off this big main road, Phil. This is the group behind, actually, the leading group of 17, a lot further up the road, and they will switch across to the left into that central reservation there, and then a sharp left, and they will go up the climb of St. Petersburg. This is Christian Moreau, the rider from Festina. He's making a late burst, trying to get himself up to that leading group, but really he should have saved it for that final climb and tried to leap across on the incline.
Well, I think it's Lely and Rick Verbruggen who's trying to chase behind Moreau. This is the climb now for the leaders. This will be interesting. This is the last chance for the non-sprinters now at the 7% climb of the Petersburg. Then it's a case of running into the finish, something like 3 or 4 kilometers. That's all that's left.
Seiko rider on the back there was Laurent Dufaux. That's good to see him riding so well to the front of these very hilly races. Still, the pressure on the front is coming from Team Telecom. They're going to make this a very hard climb, Phil, to make sure that there aren't any attacks, because there are some very good attacking riders in the group. In the group, we've got the winner from last year, Michael Bogart. We've got in this group as well, Van Petegem. He will be looking to try and accelerate. And also sitting on the back there, Pat Jonker, the Aussie-Dutch rider on the US Postal Service.
He's come over to the US Postal Service, and I think the US Postal will be delighted to see a bit of sign of form from Patrick, who comes from Australia, but his father's Dutch, so he's never sure who he's racing for.
I think he's racing for for Australia this year, because with the Olympic Games coming up at the end of the season in Sydney, he feels he's got a great chance of representing Australia, which means now he won't be able to revert nationalities again, because he can only do it once during a career.
Right, and I think he's been the Dutch time trial champion and the Australian time trial champion over the years. He's not a sprinter, he's a workhorse, a former winner of the Route du Sud, and had a very good ride one year in the Tour de France. Now, there's somebody slipping on the gas at the front there, and it looks like David Rebellin. Well, look at this little man scurrying up the climb. Everything he's got now to try and get the gap. And if he's got it, Paul, over the top, he's about 2 miles from the finish.
Absolutely. This is the place where you have to launch the attack here if you want to try and win alone. And David Rebellin knew just exactly where he was going to move. Telecom were trying to keep the pace high, Phil, to prevent an attack like this going clear. But David Rebellin has really hit them. This now looks very much like the shape of Vinokurov. He's done his job at the front for Team Telecom, and he's getting blown away from the bike race. Rebellin at the front there has around about 150 meters, but what's important now is to try and organize the chase behind him.
Well, it's not the first time we've been down this road today, so they know the way now. And David Rebellin here, these leaky gas colours, they're quite attractive colours really for television, has made his move. He's got the gap now. Can he go and finish it off with a great classic victory?
Absolutely, he's got to get off this small road now and then into town. He drops down just a little bit, then it's a right-hander, and he's in the finishing straight. At the moment, Phil, he's keeping that gap at 200 meters. This is a do-or-die effort. The group behind has certainly split to pieces, and you can see right up there, very close to the front in second position there, is Oscar Freire. He's having a great bike ride today. Now watch out for him when it comes down to the sprint at the end.
So Rebellin, a very consistent player in the world of cycling, looking for the great win now as he's got a wonderful gap over the field here and a chance to settle in. It's his steady downhill for a few minutes and maybe he can lift. He's taken one look over his shoulder. You can see him right in the distance, but the chase is on.
Well, the Rabobank riders, they're not able to do anything at the moment. It'll be interesting to see just who is chasing at the front of the pack there. It looks as if it's a Mapei rider from here, and it may well be that that is Paolo Bettini, because in the group there is Oscar Freire, the world champion. But the speed is on here in the Amstel Gold Race, Phil. We're just coming off now. The gap advantage is 6 seconds for Rebellin back to the group. He's in the town. He won't have too much to worry about the wind at the moment. He's got a right-hand turn onto the main street here of Maastricht, then another right-hand turn, and he'll be inside the finishing straight, and he will see the banner across the line.
5th in this race. That's his best ever finish back in 1994. Not quite the same course then, but even so, he knows the route as well as anybody. It's that slightly bit built man, doesn't have a sprint, he's got to hang on here. It's a very, very long running, and we're now onto the main road into the town centre here. They look to me from the air as though they are closing it down.
Well, it still looks to be around about the 100 metres. Somebody's taking up the pace, making at the front. A change of leaders on the front of this group. Very shortly we'll be inside the 1,000-metre banner, and there it is. And this group is really hammering down. Pat Jonker taking up the last position. We're going down now alongside the bridge which takes the cars over the River Meuse, or the Mars as they call it here in Maastricht. And he's now very shortly going to turn right here, Phil, and he will be in the finishing straight.
Well, this is a fabulous effort, Paul, by these riders, but I think Rebellin, you know, he's thrown down the Talbot. Surely he can't hold off the sprinters. He hasn't got the gap.
Well, he's got to keep going, but look on the front of the main field, the pink and white jersey there, that is Stefan Weissermann. Right up behind him in the bunch there is the man who was the world champion, Oscar Freire, and the leader of the World Cup, his own teammate, Eric Zabel. Moving up there, Andre Schmiel as well.
Well, Schmiel is doing well here because if he scores some points, of course, he's going to close the gap. As Schmiel, the winner of the Tour de Flanders, we've got Zabel, the winner of Milan-San Remo, and this is a real runner. And now Bettini's here, the winner of Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and Rebellin now racing for the line. It's such a long way to the finish here in the Amstel Gold. That's the straight, and he's not going to hold the sprinters off. You must feel sad for him for that. Here comes Zabel on the right now. Is this going to be a magical result for the German having his best season? Yes, it is. Zabel takes it, and Zerberg was pipped there by his teammate Bogart, but they got second and third for the Rabo.
Fantastic sprint there, Phil. We can see that Rabobank were trying to get themselves into the finish, but they couldn't do it. A flying Eric Zabel, and he's got maximum points.
So there is the melee down at the finish. This is the sprint finish here by Eric Zabel. Round 5 of the World Cup, his first win in the Amstel Gold. And my goodness me, that man surely is well on his way to winning the trophy as we now go into the halfway period where we take a break from World Cup racing and go back into the big tours of the year 2000. A very different Amstel Gold Race, a tenacious bunch, and at the end of the day, taken out by the World Cup leader, last year's champion, beaten in the sprint, Michael Bogart. He should feel happy about that. And Marcus Zerberg getting third, and in fairness, that's a great result for Zerberg after his big disappointment last year when he was almost in at the kill until he was knocked off by a motorbike. It was a different Amstel Gold Race. Whether it was a great one, I'll leave you to decide. For Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying, see you all again shortly.
Mountains competition, a very courageous rider. And moving forward, the team manager there of Faso Bortolo coming up to give Ortenzi a little chatting to at the moment because they are in a reasonably good situation with Francesco Casagrande in the main field behind. But once we come to the more repetitive nature of this year's Amstel Gold Race, the big names will certainly come to the front. In the past, the Amstel Gold Race has actually nipped across into Belgium, and because of that foot and mouth disease, they decided to keep the race totally inside the Dutch borders. It was actually the Belgians that didn't want the incursion, and I think it's actually made it a slightly tougher race, Phil, because we do 2 circuits, which include the Kutenberg, which they go over on 2 occasions.
And we're still to see that climb. Actually, that's a 22% climb, a very steep climb indeed. And there's a lot of US postal riders here being shadowed by Leon Van Bon, the Mercury boy. These are great rivals now as the champion goes through. And Lance Armstrong just caught a glimpse of him over the shoulder there of Leon Van Bon.
Schmiel on the front of the group, very nervous. He wants to reduce the size of this group here. very upset with his race there in the Paris-Roubaix just 2 weeks ago. He was crashed in the first section of cobblestones, had to chase for the whole race, and rode back incredibly, Phil, to finish. I think it was in 8th place at the end of the day. A marvellous comeback from that man who really is a gutsy rider. At the age of 38, he still doesn't want to give up.
No, absolutely incredible. Just look, Paul, at all of the Rabobank riders, and they're even getting help here from Theo de Roy, the team manager's coming up alongside as well. Pass a few words of advice. Puffing and blowing from the riders here. They've got men in the breakaway, but it's not the men they would want, I would assume.
That was a pretty slick move there, you noticed, by Eric Decker. That's actually an illegal move that he took on board there. Theo de Roy had a small drink just inside the armrest of the car, and being a very slick professional, he grabbed it, and there's no chance at all of the referee seeing that, although we managed to pick it up on television.
And of course we're not telling anybody. As we watch now, the men from Rabobank keep the pace up here. 2, 4, 6, 7 riders left at the front, 8 riders left at the front of the original 13, and they're under pressure. Now, how much pressure are they under? Because this breakaway was 8 minutes up, and it's nothing like that now. What, 40 seconds?
40 seconds or so, and not a really big group behind either. The pressure on the front coming from Rabobank. All of their men are in here. Eric Decker, Michael Bogard. Michael Bogard is #1 for this team today. They will be looking after him absolutely and hoping to put him in an ideal position when we come into the climbs towards the end, because he rode exceptionally well last weekend in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But for the Dutch team, this is the most important day of their year. There are a lot of small races here in Holland, Phil, which these riders shine in after the Tour de France, which is their only World Cup event and the only real major one-day race that they have.
That's right, it really is. You think in the hotbed of cycling in Holland, they'd be closing roads every weekend for major races, but in fact the opposite is the truth. This is the only single-day race. They totally close the roads for racing here in Holland, and it's a big one, 254 kilometres. As we race back to Maastricht now, and we've got 62.5 kilometres still to run.
Well, Andre Schmiel is pretty nervous. He obviously knows the main field is coming back, and very shortly we'll be hitting a fairly steep climb, so he wants to make sure he gets there early before the main field does, and hopes that a small group will come off in front of the main field and start the ball rolling once again. A big attack by him, and he's lodged 1 or 2 riders off the back at the moment. In fact, Kessler here, the telecom rider, put into a bit of difficulty, but Georgi Hincapie riding really high on his early classics performance with that Gont-Wevelgem win and 4th place in Paris-Roubaix. And it's good to see Freddie Rodriguez riding to the front. We haven't seen an awful lot of Freddie so far this year. He did actually just a couple of days ago get 3rd place in the Grand Prix Pinot Cerami, which is a very good ride by him. And I think this is the kind of climbing race that should suit Freddie Rodriguez, and it's nice to see him at the front.
Yes, he's had a couple of top 3 places this year, and I'm sure he's building up now. He's been a proud wearer of the Championship of the USA jersey. He had 7 wins last year, and the majority of those coming after he picked up his title. So he's looking forward to defending it perhaps in Philadelphia in the month of June this year, as he sits onto the back now. He's got a powerful sprint when he gets a chance to use it, as young Fred. He's now 27.5 years of age.
Another one of the big transfers of the winter season as well, because last year he was a member of the huge Mappé Quick-Step team, and he decided to move across with the Domo Farm Freaks Belgian division that split across there, and I think he's made a very good decision to stay with them.
So Fred Rodriguez sitting on the back, looking quite cool and collected. He'd been in the breakaway a long time today. This break settling in after 60 kilometres, 38 miles. And now we're heading up to inside 60 to go, so they've had a long day in the saddle out front. Thinned down rather drastically over the last few miles, and there's still some tough climbs to come, to say the least, as we run down back towards the finish in Maastricht. And again, typical of Holland, these very narrow roads here right down by the Belgian borders, and not just the Belgian borders but the German borders as well, as this breakaway stays out of sight, but the chase is very, very definitely on. And I think Fred is hanging off the back here, knowing that the catch is inevitable now.
Well, these roads are actually not too bad at all, but when the Amstel Gold Race does come through a lot of the towns here in Holland, they are very dangerous indeed, because there's a lot of road furniture, as they call it nowadays, circular roundabouts and directional islands to try and direct the traffic, but it makes it very difficult for the bike riders. This is the Bemelerberg, and it's only 4.5%, but Hincapie's at the front there trying to dislodge 1 or 2 riders, and the only thing these guys are doing right now, Phil, is actually delaying the catch, because it's certain to happen quite shortly.
Big George there, possibly thinking of taking Fred's jersey off him in Philadelphia in June as the national champion. George has won that title as well, of course.
He's won that title and been disqualified
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
It was unbelievable, the scenario that day when he was awarded the jersey, and it was only at the press conference he was told that he wasn't the legal wearer because he'd been disqualified after the judges had take into account a complaint that he was paced back into the race after a late puncture.
Which he was, never disputed, but the fact was it was a little bit late to tell him perhaps. 8 riders then still survive down there. Amongst them is Carsten Kroon. I think he's the only Rabobank rider left in this breakaway now. Fred Rodriguez, Paolini is still down there, and Ortenzi, and certainly George Hincapie. Kessler is the man from Telecom setting the pace. And another little climb here, and spring just about bursting, but we're just on into May now, just tickling May, and the weather here is still very unseasonal-like.
I think you're right about Freddie Rodriguez. He certainly seems to be very often at the back of that group there. The big work here on the same climb now still being done by the Rabobank riders. They're obviously trying to pull it all back together because they're banking everything, I think, today on one card, and that's a card of Michael Bogert.
Coming to the back, there's the gap. The first time we've had an official check at 55 seconds, so a little bit more than I thought. It looked closer than that. Huge crowds, of course, Holland, but many of the spectators have not been allowed to get to their favourite vantage points because of the restriction of movement in the countryside in Holland because of the foot and mouth disease, this disease which runs through the hoofed animals in Britain, and it's been reported over here as well, so they're taking no chances.
A quick glimpse at the back of the group there. I saw the man Fernando Escartin looking quite good on the far side there. Gianluca Bortolami, the winner of the Tour of Flanders, somewhat surprise winner of the Tour of Flanders, but since then he rode quite well in Paris-Roubaix, and hoping to ride a little higher in the standings today with the possibility of regaining the lead in the World Cup. But he's going to have to come up against this very strong armada. There are 6 riders from Rabobank here at the front of the main field. The 6th one there, you can see in a red jersey, is Marcus Zuberg, the champion of Switzerland.
Well, clearly the Rabobank boys not too confident in their man Carsten Kroon up there because they're emanating the chase. Carsten has never won a bike race, but he certainly distinguished himself last year in the Giro d'Italia because he was an early leader in 3 competitions there, the Intergiro, the Points and King of the Mountains leader. And so he's obviously got good form as well.
Well, they will be happy in the fact, Phil, that they do have at least one man represented in the lead group. They've always taken this as being their pride and joy, their performances here at the Amstel Gold Race. And in fact, their team manager, Jan Raas, won it so many times that at one time it was nicknamed the Amstel Gold Raas.
Yes, absolutely right. There's Andre Smil, a bit of a shout coming from the group here as they want more speed, more speed. They're still under pressure, but they're still trying to keep this breakaway going. They would really like now a little bit of an injection of strength from the back, but they certainly don't want everybody up there. As we look here now at Paolini sitting on the back, Smil is just in front of him, and I think it was Hincapie got to the front, was it, Paul?
That's Hincapie on the front right now, leading away on the descent. It's a bit surprising, really, to see Andre Smil in a lead group like this of non-major contenders for the finish of the Amstel Gold Race, and he may well have been thinking he could surprise all the other guys. What has happened with the race being so difficult so far is we've actually reduced the size of the main field, and when we go back there you can see there are only about 45 riders left in the group, but the big advantage must go over to Rabobank because they've got a lot of men there.
These beautiful Dutch country lanes here as we course through them, and they rise and kick a little bit, and then the steep ones as well. Whoops, up straight to the back comes Kessler. He hasn't been left behind as he makes sure he's staying in the group. There's still one missing, but they've sent away the service car, which to me means the race is now closing in fast.